Hey folks, how you doing? Another question that we get more recently, and I think this feeds into another question about how do you get a building. And the question is more specific, and it's how did we buy Warren Jeff's compound? Pretty cool question, huh? So we are, for those of you who don't know, we acquired Warren Jeff, who was a nefariously wicked cult leader through the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints cult, predominantly out of Texas and Colorado City, Arizona, and South Dakota. And you can look it up, just Google Warren Jeffs, you'll be appalled. But this FLDS cult, he was caught up in, he had like 80 some wives at the end of it. But what he really got caught up for was some tax stuff, and then also some of his wives, some of his brides were underage, like 13 years old, and allegations of younger. And so he has permanent residency now, thanks to the great state of Texas, in the federal penitentiary. So he's in a good place. He's being well taken care of, sure. But then the community up there in Colorado City was left without a prophet. So here they are, nearly 10 years after their leader has gone, and about half of that community has left the church. Now in that community, it's taught that if you leave the church, you go to hell, because being a part of the FLDS church is a part of your salvation. And so what it's created is a community up there that has about half of its people still in, radically and fundamentally opposed to the half that are out, and the half that are out have been left to wander with no moral compass, and so there's an inordinately high amount of drug use, of abuse, of sexual abuse, of teen pregnancy in this community. Combine that with just a whole host of things. So to the point though, almost 3 years ago now, wow, as part of some of my work with FBI on the Governor's Council for Human Trafficking, we were made aware of some raids that were happening, and some arrests that were going to be made, and there were some young women involved at the other side of this who wanted out and needed a place to go, and we were an option for them. It came through a ministry that my wife runs called Women's Development, and Elaine, one of the women on that, was one of our first kind of segues into that community. It was a very closed off community, nobody was allowed there, and so about 3 years ago, Elaine was a part of an outreach group that went up there. They did some Christmas type outreaches, helped the fire department with some different things, but that was when we first were alerted, and that work kind of coincided with work with the FBI, and we started to take in girls from that community. And they weren't like, little girls like 5, 6, 7. They were late teens, but needed help, and they were involved in, it was polygamous stuff, but it was more than just polygamy bride things. It was sexually related abuse, ritualistic sexual abuse, and just a litany of other pains and ills that they had. Drug abuse being one of them. And so we just intermittently were serving that community since 2015, and then in early 2017, we had a group that went up there as part of an outreach, and a gentleman named Ryan King. Just a weird series of events, but at this time, 2017, there were a couple ministries trying to do outreach in there, and some of them were pretty successful, running a thrift store and just trying to like low-key get into this lockdown community and serve, just be the hands and feet of Jesus. And Ryan met some missionaries named Glenn and Jenna Jones, and through them and through some other people, we eventually came upon a woman named Brielle Decker, and Brielle called us one day and said that she had a house up there, and here the Dream Center is serving people down here in Phoenix. Why don't we maybe use her house up there in Colorado City? And I thought, that sounds like a great idea. Like, we'll save on airfare and like serve them right in their community. So it seemed like a wonderful idea. Well, it turns out that Brielle was not just some woman, and the house was not just some house. So Brielle was the wife number 65 for Warren Jeffs, and the house was his actual entire compound. And by compound, I mean roughly a 3-acre campus. You can imagine that. It's got gardens and vineyards on it. It's got garden houses and sheds, but it also has a 30,000 square foot main building, a 3-story main building that is, imagine like a hotel, a 3-story hotel with 50 some rooms. And then it has a 5,000 square foot kind of a guest bedroom house that one of his brothers lived in. And then it's got another about 5,000 square foot garden house that has 2 stories and rooms and bedrooms and things like that. It's also got a basketball court, basketball tennis court type thing. I mentioned gardens, and it's a beautiful property. It was the nicest property in town. It was built for their profit, so it's wonderfully made. And so we were, kind of taken aback by the opportunity and thought, well, heck yes, why wouldn't we do this? So scrambled a team together, an exploratory team, and I took my operations person. And I say this because I think just the raw steps could help you. Took up an exploratory team to just see the operational feasibility of the property. Was it, because I'd heard that sometimes when the FLDS are pushed out, they put concrete in the toilets and just do bad stuff. And so we had an exploratory team up for that. Then we had another exploratory team up that was seeing if outreach was feasible in that community for us. And then I, for my part, started to assemble a team of our lawyers and folks who could really look a little more into the deal, because as it usually turns out, the deal is much more complex. The acquisitions deal is much more complex than what it has ever presented. So as it turned out, Brielle, lovely young woman, she's on staff with us up there now, part of our advisory committee, but she had like a 6th grade education, as most of the women did. It wasn't important for women to finish school up there. They had a role in their society, their church society, and they just stuck with that role. And so Brielle, as it turned out, had been awarded the house a year prior with the condition, because she was awarded like an $800,000. It's not a settlement, it's not a pain and suffering thing, but it was like that. It was that sort of form. So she had been awarded that, and she had leveraged that to get this house. And so that was the thing, was that here she was out of the FLDS church, and she had no support from them. She didn't really know many people on the outside. She didn't know any churches or anybody. She barely knew us. But here she was. She tried for a year. Bless her heart. But her idea was to eventually turn it into, and she wrote on the papers, a dream house. Like a year before she even knew us or anything about it, she had a dream to call it a dream house. And so she went down the path, and she did a GoFundMe page, and just about broke my heart to see it. I logged in one day and saw it, and this was before us. She had raised like $140 toward the project, and I mean the bills alone for the place are like $5,000 a month for just the utilities and everything like that. So here's this woman who desperately wants to do something to help her community, but she's just slammed with bills. And so she tried for a year to get the money to pay the bills, and she also, though, during that time had to pay taxes, which were another about $1,000 a month, and she owed some back taxes on the property, about $50,000. So she came to the about a year into it on her own, and the UEP Trust, who I'll explain that in a minute, but the UEP Trust told her they were evicting her. And so at the time that she came to us, the eviction notice had already been served. The contract had already been closed. She had a couple angel investors come in to try to help her out, and nothing. Everybody had promises, and that's the story of this community's life. A lot of promises, and nothing ever followed through. And so by the time she's talking to us, she's in a breakdown situation, like a mental nervous breakdown situation and going to lose everything. And so I was hearing back good things from my outreach team. We think the community, we got a good grip. We can do some good outreach up here. I was hearing back good things from my operations team. The building was immaculate. It was amazing. But the team I was a part of to sort of create the architecture of the deal, it was absolutely dire. And so I began a series of legal meetings with the president and the director of the trust that owned the home. So historically in this community, in this FLDS cult, members of the church don't own any property. The church owns everything, and so it's really it's like socialism on steroids, right? So like everything goes to the church, and then the church will give you the different parts. And the crazy part is that we see it now for what it is, but for the first 80 years of that cult's existence, things actually worked pretty well. And that was over 100 years. That system actually worked pretty well. Like when you had a fair prophet leader in charge, like I hear stories of before Warren Jeffs, and it was like a mini religious utopia. I mean, there was still probably stuff going on, but they had galas and balls and dances, and everybody's needs were taken care of in the church. And so it's really, from their perspective. And in their defense, like, 'cause we look from the outside and we say, well, why would you let that happen? But from their defense, they really believe they were living out like an Acts-based church where everybody puts everything together and they have one. In fact, those are some of the scriptures used to justify their system. So anyway, all the assets were owned by the FLDS church, and by all the assets, I mean those 10,000 people that I mentioned, all of their homes, like everything was owned. All their money, everything was owned by the church. So when all this stuff happened with Warren, that was one of the charges against him, was that he was abusing his power and authority, and of course taxes and just everything like that. So the federal government swept in and swept, cleaned out, but they also took that power away from the FLDS church to own those different things, and it was entrusted to a trust. The United Effort Plan Trust, and I don't know why they didn't change the name, but ironically that's what Jeff's called it too. And so the UEP Trust now is the owner of hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate and property and acreages and everything up there. The trust, though, however, is now run not by FLDS Mormons but by predominantly Mormons. And so I began meeting with that trust, the angriest group of 12 people I'd ever seen in my life. Like, these meetings were not good. There was an immense blockade against the Dream Center coming into that community initially, and it all hinged around, we were best known for sex trafficking, like for human trafficking, and the rumor was that the Dream Center was just going to expand up there into that place, and we would just be bringing in, and literally I would be in these little town council meetings, and I'd have little old women yelling at me like, "You're just going to bring a bunch of prostitutes up here, and they're going to tempt our men," and there was a lot of racist stuff being said. Like we would bring up some of our outreach leaders, and they're women, they're inner city women, black women from the inner city here, and kids, and they got tattoos, and they're all cool looking, cool to us, like arm sleeve tattoos and stuff, but like up here it was like, wow, imagine, one of my leaders, she's like 5'11", amazing black woman. She got the full on hair going on, and got sleeve tattoos and tattoos on her neck. She looks cool down here, but like imagine her standing next to the whitest little white kid you've ever seen in a prairie dress, and the mom's in a prairie dress, and the dads are all wearing long sleeve shirts and concerned. Like that's the situation, right? So like, yeah, it was like lit. So it was tough. Brielle at the time, bless God, she was not a believer at the time. She'd really been hurt by the church, as most people here had. In fact, we don't even use the word church up in this community, because the church is a is a cuss word to most of them. The church is the church, the FLDS church, and so you really can't talk stuff like that. But Brielle, bless God, she got married. She has since come to know the Lord. I was a part of that meeting where she just gave her heart to God, and her husband did as well, her new husband did as well, and we just bless God for all that he's doing. But back to the deal. So Brielle got married, and just had a real tough time, and honestly she stopped communicating for us for about a 30-day period. And it was during a period we really needed to hear something, because here I am, I'm looking at her contracts and everything's expired. Not only expired, but like terminated. They're like, okay, after 30 days after this, the whole agreement is terminated. And so all I had was like the word of this lawyer who was from up here saying, well, if you guys can help Brielle, we'll think about reviving it, but it's not up to me. It's going to be up to this board, this UEP Trust board. And so I worked so hard to negotiate with the lawyer, and I had my lawyer on the phone, and for about a 2-month period, I was up here every week, sometimes a couple times a week, in Colorado City, and just negotiating, trying to figure it out. Like they are being sued a lot, the trust is, and needing money to pay lawsuits and things. And so here, there's this white elephant property they have that could sell. They had a buyer. They had a buyer for more money than what they were trying to ask out of us. And they're like, we think we're going to go with this other buyer. Like, the money's there. We need the money. And you guys aren't saying you're coming up with the money. And so, we just got to do that. So I cannot tell you that 60-day period, the deal was on, then it was off, then it was off, then it was on, then it was off. I mean, I would literally drive home sometimes, that 5.5-hour drive, just crying out to God, like, okay, we tried, like, I'm sorry, God, I believe in my heart, I tried my hardest, I did my best, there is nothing, they are dead set, it's not going to work. Our heart is still to serve, though, God. I got a lot of projects in Phoenix, I'm just going to move on, like, literally, out of those 60 days, maybe half the trip's coming back. That was my conversation with the Lord. But then something broke, and something happened, and between the lawyer and I, we struck a deal, and I think it was God touching his heart and showing us favor, and I know he knew all along, God knew all along, but we came up with a deal. And so part of my concern was there were some elections coming up in that town, and the parties that were coming in were adamantly opposed to the Dream Center. And I said, Jeff, the lawyer up there, you expect me to give you $50,000 to pay back taxes and $400,000 for this, and I have no assurance that the group coming in, they're just going to not turn on my water bill, like, because they controlled it. They did that kind of stuff, man. There's a whole water rights fight. So we could have got the property with no electric, no water bill, because they controlled, the FLDS controlled all the utilities. And so, Jeff, I need some assurance that I can pull out of this thing and get my money back. My money for the taxes, to get the taxes down. And we finally came to an agreement with the help of my lawyer and another lawyer up here, and we struck a deal. And so the deal was that we had 2 years of no rent, of no paying it, just paying the back taxes. And the deal was, if I got kicked out by the FLDS or the Mormons or whoever, or by anybody else, that I would get all that money back. And so it was a low-risk venture at that point, but a lot to gain. And so we embarked on a 2-year contract to just kind of proof what I pitched to them finally was a proof of concept. And man, I'll never forget so that got approved at the lawyer level, and then it had to go to the board trust. And I'd never been so nervous. I mean, I talked to big groups and powerful groups, but here I was going into a little community group of 12 people who were members of that trust, and Some of them wore the traditional prairie dress garb, and some of them didn't. But they had all authority, like 100% authority. And I walked into that meeting with their minds set against me. So even though we had a legal framework for how it could work at the lawyer level, we had no board approval, and they were still the ones who felt like, we were not going to be good for the community.